Man, if somebody had told me a plan of what to do for what I'm doing now versus back then, I would have gladly thanked them and sent them a card. But I did not know what I know now. So back then, our budget was about 1.1 million on the first building that we did, and I actually bought the house hard money. My experience was flipping houses, so I was very
Mm-hmm.
familiar with that. And I had investors, so I raised private money for the whole 1.1.
Mm.
And kind of like I said, as we're going through this, I was just learning and problem solving as we're going. And my budget for my rehab actually like at least doubled. And I didn't know all of these things. I didn't know I was going to have a full 13 fire suppression system and all these things. It just added six figures multiple times to the budget. So I had to sell two rental properties actually to continue through construction to be able to do
Wow.
this. And then I raised more money to go and get that capital back. But so what we did was I actually really like this kind of structure, but I raised all private money on the deal. And then so Laura and I, we have 100% equity in this
Great.
project. And then so we got to the about 2 year mark, and that was 2 years of owning the property, not 2 years of operation. And then I went to my local bank, did an appraisal. Appraisal came in much higher than my 1.1 million. I was able to cash out, refinance, pay out all of my investors, still have 100% equity, and then have a long-term stabilized. I mean, this is a few years ago, so it was like 4% interest rate. And I'm like, perfect, this is great, right?
Yeah.
So that was how we did the first one. And I think I had an advantage because I knew raising money and talking to people and the lingo and that kind of stuff.
For sure.
A lot of people don't. And I am not doing that model anymore. I'm doing SBA now. And I would recommend this to most people, especially if you're going the way of new construction. I really like the SBA model because they lend on both sides of the deal. They'll
Mhm.
lend on the real estate side and they'll lend on the operation side and all of that kind of safety net reserves, interest reserves, that kind of stuff as well. So for us, a typical deal for one of our 10,000 square foot mansions is about $3 million. And that's total development costs on both sides. So it's about 2.2
Mhm.
million on the real estate side and about another 6 to 800,000 on the operations side with, working capital, furniture, a good amount of money for interest reserves while you're building, while you're leasing up, and then, some money in there for builder overages and things like that on the construction side. So they'll take that whole thing. For me and a lot of our partners that we work with, they lend about 85% of that whole thing. So therefore, we need about $450 grand as a down payment funds. And so I honestly didn't use my own capital to do this, and a lot of our partners don't. We are able to go and raise money. And if you have equity in real estate, you can pull some of that equity to use it. So a lot of times it's a combination, right? You can put in some capital so you have skin in the game, and then you go raise maybe $300,000 or so. And when you plug everything into the numbers and you're doing one of our mansions bottle and you're at like $8,000 a month per grandma minus all your expenses and things, I mean, you're splitting a monthly cash flow of 45 grand a month,
Mhm.
and that's just on the cash flow side. Then you have the exit play when you go to exit the deal and you're splitting up between you and your investor partners, literally a couple $1 million on the real estate side. And you build this whole thing out. Here's my 60-month exit strategy to either sell or to cash out, refinance, and pay out my investors. They're getting massive ROIs, 40, 50% cash on cash returns. And they're having this safety net of I'm backed by real estate. And because we're building new construction, we're literally building at like 55 to 60% of appraised value. We're
Mhm.
building at a discount. So there's so much, even though we're 85% leverage there, it's not 85% of loan to appraisal. It's actually
Mhm.
like much, much lower than
Yeah.
that.
How do you go about the partnership piece when you raise money? Are you doing private money still for that big chunk, or how do you usually go about it now?
So as we're raising money, and we'll stay with this example of, we're about 450,000 to do one of our deals. If you're looking to raise say 3 to 400,000, right? You're in that range. I like to find 1 to 2 investors. And it might be some person who's able to come up with 300 grand. It might be two people looking around the 150, 200 range. I do not like to come in with like 50 grand a bunch of different times. The deal itself is an amazing deal. When you talk through it and you're able to give a full presentation, you can show your architectural plans or renderings and all that kind of stuff. It makes it just a complete no-brainer, which you're cash flowing 40 plus $1,000 a month to be able to split with the team. So I like to find 1 or 2 people and I keep them on the equity side and not on the debt side for a specific reason, especially if you're looking at the deal structure and you're talking SBA. that means that they want you to have this down payment amount. And it might be, 20% down, 15, 10% down. For me, they did 15% down. So I need that 450 grand in cash. And when I say I mean the borrowing entity. And so the borrowing entity actually has multiple entities. It has my holding company and it has my investors holding company. So the cash can come from anyone on the ownership team, right? It just has to come from that. It can't be an extra debt that, or can't be private money from grandma and they're going to sign a second position note. That's usually not the case because they don't want another loan. If you're going to get an 85% loan, they want you to have 15% down payment. So that's actually just cash that needs to be wired. So I will structure a deal usually where one or two investors come in on an equity position because we need it in equity. And I like to keep them usually like 10 to 19%. That's kind of the sweet spot that I like. I don't want to be above 20. At 20, you have to personally guarantee. Below 20, worst case scenario for them is they lose the money that they put into the deal. That's absolute worst case. If they have to personally guarantee, then it's much worse than that as a worst case scenario, right? They can go after them. They can take their assets and take them to court and that kind of stuff to get the money that the bank lost. So if you can bring on somebody or two people and say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Investor, I can offer you 10% equity in the real estate and the operations company, and you're going to contribute, 150 grand. And here's the cash on cash return and that kind of stuff. When you look at all the numbers, the models that we do, it's big numbers, more than you can get in multifamily or any other thing that I know, by like at least double. So they have this return that they realistically cannot get anywhere. And then you're showing them, here's the safety, here's the security, right? Like, even if I screw this thing up, we could rent this, right? I know rental, operations companies that will come and rent this at $3 a square foot or something like that. We'll be able to cover the note plus make money. Like, there is backups and then there's backups to backups and all of that kind of stuff. And it's really, it may sound easy the way I just said it, but it's a lot of legwork up front to get to that point. And honestly, there's maybe 50 up to 100 grand of capital to get to that point, to get through all of your architectural and engineering kind of stuff in order to pull permits, in order to get a hard bid from a contractor. And then the fourth component is you need to get that appraisal from the bank. When you have those four things done, then here's a full package with a bow on top. Like, we are shovel ready. I just need you to wire these funds. The bank's going to wire, and then we can get started.